You are looking live at Yale University, where today police had to be called in to arrest dozens who set up an encampment on campus. On Passover, protesters there could be heard demanding Yale divest from Israel, our strongest ally in the Middle East. And over at Columbia University, it's gotten so bad there that they had to cancel in-person class today. This after a rabbi warned that Jewish students should return home, should do so for their own safety. A bipartisan group of lawmakers showing up on campus today to say enough.
Jewish students feel unsafe, insecure, and broadly harassed to the point where the president had to cancel classes today.
What lawmakers are recommending right now, as one of the members of Congress who felt the need to head to campus today will join us here in moments. Come on in, I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on News Nation. All right, hello. Here we go. Hanging out with us today, Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday and a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official. Scott Bolden is the former D.C. Democratic Party chairman, News Nation contributor as well. Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill. And hanging out with us in and out throughout the hour, Mick Mulvaney. Hello, Mick, joining us from Charlotte today. Mick, of course, former Trump White House chief of staff, News Nation contributor as well. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in.
Hello.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
A big story in New York today, not Columbia, or separate to Columbia. We'll get to Donald Trump here in a second. May Mailman's going to be joining us. I promise you we'll get there. But, Chris, these protests, they're still going on at Columbia. We've now seen it at Yale. I think there's some others going on at NYU as well. President Biden was asked about this just a little while ago, the scene at Columbia, and this is what he said.
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians.
Why is that the response? Is he trying to both sides it here?
I was going to say, there are good people on both sides.
I didn't go that far.
I know. I'm kidding. But only kind of, because the reality for Biden here is we've reached a tipping point on this garbage, right? Where people, the cover of the Atlantic magazine was anti-Semitism has gone mainstream. When you get to the point where the Atlantic and other bastions of the left are this way, we know we've reached a tipping point. These campuses are fed up. They're throwing protesters out. They're kicking kids out of school. We've reached that point. But at the same time, Biden has to say to those voters, to those younger voters, we feel for the plight of the Palestinians. We understand what they're going through. We know why you're upset. But, you know, this is unsustainable. It can't go on.
But why can't it be both? I mean, we have reports on campuses and communities. You hear about the protesters that were protesting the war and the treatment of Palestinians, but it can be both. We've got reports that both have been harassed either by each other or by third parties, if you will.
But isn't the difference right now the anti-Semitism and how that is front and center, and when you got people saying we are Hamas and divest from Israel and so on?
Yeah, that's bad. That's bad, and that's anti-Semitism, and that's as bad as racism, and that's as bad as violence, and it needs to stop. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But we've got to take a holistic approach to this and say, well, why are they protesting? What's at the source of this? Is the source anti-Semitism, or are they against how the war is being implemented by Israel? It may be both. I don't know, depending on the protesters. But there's some pro-Israel groups who have protested how Gaza and the Palestinians are being treated and how the war is being implemented as part of these overall protests over the last, say, 6 months or so.
I also don't.
What do you do with them?
I also don't know if they actually understand what they're protesting, some of these protesters. I mean, are they really realize that they're supporting potentially Hamas, which killed, the most Jewish people since the Holocaust. I mean, I think
terrorist organization as well.
And it's a terrorist organization. And I just think
hope
it's
not, but I can't say whether you're right or wrong on that.
But I also think that the university presidents are actually finally getting a grip that this is not, they have to take control of this and trying to do something.
Because even the statements, whether it's racism, anti-Semitism, and violence, they've got to cut that off. There should be zero tolerance on all of these campuses for that type of language or conduct.
I'm going to get to your article in a second here, Julia. Julia wrote about this the other day for The Hill, but first, come on in, Congressman Mike Lawler. He is a Republican from the state of New York who was at Columbia University earlier today and is one of the lawmakers who is calling on the Columbia University president to resign. Congressman, thanks for being back here on The Hill. Appreciate it. First off, why did you feel the need to go, and why have the Republican delegation from New York, why have you all decided to ask the Columbia University president to resign?
Well, when you look at the terrorist attack of October 7th, it was rooted in one thing. In Gaza, they are taught to hate Jews and to want to kill Jews. And what we're seeing on campuses all across America, but especially here at Columbia University, we are seeing anti-Semitism rear its ugly head. And these institutions have allowed it to happen. If this was a racist protest, if this was a protest against gay people, if this was a protest against immigrants, you would see the institution crack down on it very, very quickly, and rightfully so. But what you're seeing when it comes to Jewish students is that the institutions of higher education have allowed this to permeate from one end of the building to the next. And we have to crack down on it. So I was proud to be there today, along with my colleague Anthony D'Esposito of New York, to stand up and say enough is enough. I've introduced 2 pieces of legislation, the Stop Anti-Semitism on College Campuses Act, which would defund institutions like Columbia, including student aid, for promoting and sanctioning anti-Semitic events like this, as well as the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which would require the Department of Education to adopt the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism and all of its contemporary examples for its enforcement cases.
Here's some other examples. Congressman Katie Britt, Republican senator, she says, quote, "This shouldn't be complicated. 1, deport any non-citizen in the U.S. who supports Hamas. 2, defund any educational institution that authorizes, facilitates, or otherwise supports these pro-terrorist activities." Marsha Blackburn, another senator, Republican, quote, "Any student on a visa that is arrested for supporting Hamas needs to be deported immediately." Are they on to something, or does any of that go too far?
No, they're 100% right. And I believe these institutions should expel the students that have engaged in violence of any kind or anti-Semitic threats targeting Jewish students. It's one thing to protest. It's one thing to voice your disagreement with policies by the United States or Israel. It's a whole other thing to call for the eradication of the Jewish people. And there needs to be consequences. I mean, look at one of my colleagues, Ilhan Omar, her daughter now claiming, "Oh, I didn't realize I'd be homeless and without food because I got expelled." I mean, there are consequences to actions. And that's what some of these folks don't seem to understand. You can't call for the eradication of Jews and think everything is going to be just okay because you're entitled to free speech. You're not entitled to make threats against people. And that's why the president of Columbia needs to resign immediately. She has failed in her obligation, her primary responsibility to ensure the safety and the well-being of students on that campus.
Right. Congressman, I know you have a hard out here, so we'll have to leave it there. Congressman Lawler, though, who was down at Columbia today, joining us live here on The Hill. Thank you, sir. And we'll talk to him again soon. Julia, here's your article that's in The Hill that's out right now. Headline, pro-Israel groups target progressive lawmakers in primaries. What's going on? What'd you write about?
Yeah, so essentially you're seeing in a number of primaries with incumbents, Jamal Bowman, for example, in New York, you have Cori Bush in Missouri, you have groups like AIPAC and the Democratic Majority for Israel that are getting involved in these primaries and endorsing pro-Israel Democratic candidates. Now, targeting an incumbent is never easy. However, these groups tell me that they see an opening on this very issue, pointing to Jewish voters in these communities and also just pro pro-Israel voters in general. I think it's interesting that we just heard from Congressman Lawler there, because when we talk about how the road to the House majority runs through Jewish communities,
he's in one of those.
He's in a heavily Jewish district.
And he's in a district that we're going to be watching in November. Does any of what we just heard from him have a chance of passing?
Well, this is, I believe this is what they would call a messaging legislation.
Yep.
This is, you want to force people to take hard votes. You want to be able to vote for something you want. But I just want to say, I blame the baby boomers for this. I blame Joe Biden and his generation for this because they glorified campus protests. They made campus protests like they won the Vietnam War. That all of the glorification of all this campus protest garbage. And here's the deal. Look it up. There's a video of the president of Pomona College. Who there were protesters in the administration building. And just listen to her and let it be a siren song for everyone in Gen X that we can say to these young people, get out. This is not what you're here for. Your parents are not spending this money and sending you here for you to obstruct the work of other people. This is not about free speech. You've chosen to go to a college. You've chosen to be in this place. Do not obstruct other people's ability to learn because you want to have a temper tantrum.
The anti-Semitism is awful, happening on Passover. $90,000 to go to Columbia. And today,
I can smell hippies and get no education for nothing.
And how much of the federal government's paying for that $90,000 for the majority of the students?
But to my colleagues on the panel, what do? What's the juxtaposition between your position, which I agree, I have grown kids, went to college, and their right to free speech, their right to assemble, their right to express themselves, not hate speech or not violence.
What about the rabbi, though, on campus?
Don't they have a right to peacefully protest?
They're not peacefully protesting.
Well, I'm saying the ones who occupied the building, for example.
So it becomes at public institutions, it's a tougher question, but at private institutions, it's easy. Universities should be about academic freedom, which is to say that people can explore things, they can say things,
and express things.
They can do whatever.
That's right.
But it is not a free speech zone. You've chosen to be part of an institution, and there are rules inside the institution. If you want to,
free speech, that colleges and universities are not free speech zones. You don't lose it anywhere in America. There's a constitution that says First Amendment.
I have a right to free speech. As a citizen of the United States.
And students.
But if I want to stand up on top of this table and light my hair on fire and start beating on pots and pans, Blake is going to excuse me. Blake is going to excuse me from the panel.
Exactly. That's a complicated scenario.
Just down the road. Historic opening arguments today. Prosecutors and Donald Trump's attorneys delivering their opening arguments today in his hush money trial. Once that wrapped, the first witness called to the stand, the former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker. May Mailman, come on in. Hello, former Trump White House attorney, friend of the show. Congratulations, May. I haven't seen you in person since you became a mama times two. Nice to see you, May. Mick Mulvaney. Hello, I think Mick is out there too. And Scott, I want to get your thoughts on this. May, let's start with you. Donald Trump opening arguments in court today. What did the Trump team say, and was it effective in your eyes?
Yeah, so I think the Trump lawyer basically laid out the facts that are going to be relevant to this case. This is a business records case. The question is going to be whether Trump actually knew about business records, whether he did them, whether he's at all responsible, and then whether they're accurate. And I would say he was president. He did not do those records, and they were accurate regardless. So those are the facts of the case. That has nothing to do with what the prosecution laid out, which was a 2016 very conspiratorial, what did the National Enquirer do? What did they know about? So I think that you're seeing the case from the prosecution side be very much not about business records, but very much about the salaciousness of it all.
Mick, what'd you make of it?
Yeah, I'm not sure the prosecution did a very good job of what I thought their basic purpose was to try to explain to people on the jury. Keep in mind, if you're on the jury, you're not supposed to know that much about what's going on. I think it's outrageous to assume you know nothing. But to make the case to the jury as to why you are bringing this case against this particular defendant. And I don't think they did a good job today of explaining why they would have done this against anybody in the whole world. That this is the first person I think anybody knows who's actually been charged with this in New York. And so I don't think the prosecution has really done a very good job of making the case, look, we would have brought a case like this against anybody, and we really think that you should put this person in jail because of this bookkeeping mistake. His specific intent was so awful that he should go to jail for this. That's going to be a really hard thing to establish, and I don't think they got off to a very good start today on that.
David Pecker, former head of the National Enquirer. Scott, why was he the first person that prosecutors chose to put on the stand?
Because he's the author of the Catch and Kill. You got to show them, not tell them in an opening statement why. And we're going to get to the business records, and several business leaders have been charged with this case, with similar charges as a misdemeanor as well as a felony. So that's not unusual. But he sets the table. He defines what catch and kill is, and then you're going to hear what the act was itself. That'll be the steamy stuff. And then you'll get to Cohen, who's going to tell you, Michael Cohen, how active Donald Trump was. So it's not just a business records case. They're going to get context to it. They're going to tell the story and Trump's involvement in this from beginning to end. And by the way, he signed those checks to Michael Cohen knowing they were reimbursement for that $130,000 while he was in the White House. There's a lot more to come with this. Opening statements don't mean everything, but they're important.
May, why David Pecker?
Because there's no case here. There's no business records case here. So you have to make the case that Trump's a bad guy and that the 2016 election was rigged and that, Trump has malintent, that generally the things going on in Trump's mind are bad. And you know what? They're speaking to the right audience because the jury is from Manhattan, and Manhattan is an 85% Democrat district that doesn't want Trump to be president. And that's what this case is about, whether Trump should be president or not. I mean, that's the whole basis of this case.
Well, May, if I may, I'm sorry, May, the Pecker's important because the $130,000 that was paid by Donald Trump to Cohen or through Cohen and reimbursed was for the catch and kill scheme. This was part of an ongoing scheme. You're going to hear him say he did this with Donald Trump all the time.
So I don't have an objection to hearing about
material.
Hearing about the scheme at some point, it might be interesting, but I'm just saying it's not the core of the case. The core of the case is who knew about the records, who signed the records, were the records legitimate or not. That is the case. Now, what the National Enquirer wanted to do about good stories or bad stories in 2016 might have some minor relevance in some way. It is just not the leading point, but that shows what the leading point is, which is Trump's a bad dude.
Well, Scott, my understanding is that catch and kill is not illegal.
I'll give you the last word.
Yeah. But it was a question to Scott. My understanding, catch and kill is not illegal. Hush money payments are not illegal. This is only about how it was accounted for. So I'm with May on this. It's easy to make Donald Trump out to look like a bad guy in Manhattan. It's hard to convict him. And my guess is the prosecutors have spent so much time around their friends at cocktail parties for the last 2 years saying what a bad person Donald Trump is. That's what they're trying to do here.
May, I got to leave it here with you.
You got to let me respond to that.
I got to run. Look, you'll be here for the next 6 weeks, I promise you that. May Mailman.
I'm going to see you on the other side.
Okay, May Mailman, great to see you. We'll talk to you again soon. Former Trump White House attorney. Appreciate it. Mick, we'll get you on the other side. Still to come here from the Hill on News Nation over the next 42 minutes. Should Mitt Romney be the next head of Harvard? That idea has been floated, and now one Democratic senator is saying it's not such a terrible idea. We'll tell you who's saying that. Plus, Democrats waving the Ukrainian flag on the House floor after passing a foreign aid bill over the weekend. Now there's a call to ban the display of foreign flags inside the chamber. What's that all about? Plus, on the other side of the break, you are breaking down what?
I don't know. If I had Mitt Romney's hair, I would be the president. That is college president hair if I have ever seen it right there. We have fresh, delicious polling hot out of the oven. We're going to talk about the RFK effect on the election and who's doing what and to whom, and it'll be good.
New numbers. Steigerwald breaks it down. Other side of the break. You're watching The Hill. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Some new numbers suggest maybe it's Donald Trump's team who should be paying closer attention to the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Steigerwald is here to break it all down. Chris?
Breaking it down. We're going to just crush it. It's going to be fabulous. Okay, so you remember when we talked about how RFK Jr. was not going to seek the Libertarian nomination, and he picked a crunchy granola soil enthusiast as his running mate. And we said, okay, so he's playing left. He's going to go left. He's not going to be as big a threat to Donald Trump. But then interesting things happen. Now, we've got two fresh and delicious polls. We have excellent polls, one from NBC News, one from Marist College. And so here's the head-to-head between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Close race. Biden's doing a little better than he was before. He's actually leading now in the Marist poll, but the race, Biden's position in the race has generally improved. Okay, now let's look at these polls individually. Here's the Marist poll when you throw in Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Well, look what happens. Look what happens. Look what happens there. Now look at that NBC News poll when you put RFK Jr. in there. Here's this next poll. And it's even more pronounced in this case when you get to the NBC News poll. Net, here is your takeaway from these two excellent polls. Here's your last graphic. In the Marist poll, Trump is down 10 points with RFK on the ballot, and he's down 9 points in the NBC News poll. Biden's only down 8 and down 5. This tells us that RFK Jr. is taking away from both of them, sure, but he's taking more away from Trump right now. Now, we don't want to overinterpret this because there's a lot of football yet to be played. And this may just be a fact that Trump's trial is starting and the Trump fatigue is setting in a little bit. He's been in the news too much. And you know my unified theory of the 2024 campaign is the candidate that voters hear less about, they're going to like more. So there could be other factors that are coming in here. But I increasingly believe that the Republicans have a lot to worry about RFK, and he is on his way to the ballot in every swing state, and it's going to be quite a goat rodeo.
Steyerwalt breaks.
How many is he on now?
So he made Michigan.
Yeah.
Wisconsin doesn't open up until June.
Okay.
Pennsylvania is the hard one, but my expectation now, and I'm surprised to be able to say this, my expectation now is that he will be on the ballot in all 7 swing states.
Wow. Hey, Mick, come on in here, and I want to ask Ashley as well. Republicans, in Republican circles, Mick's popped up first. We'll start with you. Any level of freak out here?
No, I mean, the numbers are really, really tight. But Chris is absolutely spot on that the top line number for Kennedy doesn't make any difference. It could be 2%. It could be 22%. It doesn't make any difference. He's not going to win any states. The question is, who is he pulling from? If I got a grain of salt as to both of those polls, they're national polls. And again, that doesn't really give as much insight as, say, a poll in Michigan or in Nevada or in Arizona. So, but I think generally, Chris, as usual, Steyerwalt's 95% correct.
I think 95. Any level of worry?
Well, no, I've always thought that he's going to pull people from Trump because I think that there's the extreme right that identifies with him just like the extreme left does. And I think even though you said about his vice president candidate, but she's an anti-war person, right? So she's taking all of those people that are protesting at colleges
and she's got a lot of money that will help RFK. The day that she was chosen, she stroked a huge check to the campaign, and that's helping with ballot access. So I don't know.
Real quick, Biden worlds, how worried are they about RFK?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on where he gets on the ballot. If he is on the ballot in major swing states like Arizona and Pennsylvania, that increases the worry, but they're still worried about him.
Okay. All right. Still much more ahead here on the Hill. Can it be illegal to sleep with bedding in a public place? That, by the way, is essentially the question right now before the Supreme Court. The decision could have a major impact on how homelessness all across the country is treated going forward. And the mayor whose town is before the High Court joins us on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on News Nation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. So the House of Representatives over the weekend passed several foreign aid bills, including a $61 billion measure for Ukraine. And once that happened, many Democrats on the House floor then took out miniature Ukrainian flags. And as you can see there, began waving them around.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order.
Waving those flags on the House floor. Around the table we go. What do you see, Julia?
You know, I'm not surprised by this. I think we've seen a lot of Republican and Democratic lawmakers express solidarity with Ukraine. This is obviously a very public solidarity. I have to wonder, you know, whether they expected the backlash that came from a number of Republicans on this, because within the Republican Party, there is a debate as to, you know, how much funding to give to Ukraine, how much solidarity to give to Ukraine. But it's interesting because we see lawmakers on both sides of the aisle wearing Israeli flags, for example, and there's never a question about that.
How many people are texting you right now?
I know, that's what I was saying. I'm trying not to laugh because
what'd you see there, Scott?
If I give you $60 billion, I can wave whatever I want to wave. And the ones who are complaining are the hard right or the conservative caucus for the Republicans, because they all 14 or 15 of them voted against it. So I just think that they're sore losers.
What do you see there, Ashley?
Well, Democrats voted against it too.
Not many.
Yeah.
We
same
helped.
amount.
We helped a lot.
Okay, you did. But I would say,
Help
where's
Mike
the
Johnson.
Israeli flag and where's the Taiwanese flags? We did the same thing.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, look, there is a lot of anger at Mike Johnson from the nationalist right now, from sort of the ultra MAGA or J.D. Vance community inside the Republican Party. They're furious about what Mike Johnson did, and this flag is a symbol to them, and it's treason, and it's all that stuff. But if you believe that Ukraine is fighting evil, then you're in support of Ukraine. And I think, to Julia's point, if these were Israeli flags, right, who would be upset? The Squad might be upset, but Republicans wouldn't be upset about it. They're not mad about the flags. They're mad about Ukraine.
Hey, Mick, what'd you make of it?
You know, generally I don't have a big problem with it. But that being said, it's not a pro-Ukrainian comment as much as it is an anti-Republican comment. That's all that it is. But you're right. Otherwise, you'd see a Taiwanese flag or something else up there. But that's just the petty stuff that happens inside the House. There's no way the rules are going to get changed because you're right. We always have flags for other countries. But it's probably in bad taste. But what else is new?
All right. You are looking live now, meantime, at the Supreme Court, which today heard arguments in what could be a landmark case. Now, in 2018, 3 homeless people sued the city of Grants Pass, Oregon, over its ordinances banning people from sleeping with beddings or camping in public spaces. The justices are now debating whether or not cities can punish people for sleeping outside when they have nowhere else to go, or if that is a violation of the Eighth Amendment.
Where are they supposed to sleep? Are they supposed to kill themselves not sleeping?
How about if there are no public bathroom facilities? Do people have an Eighth Amendment right to defecate and urinate?
Joining us now is the mayor of Grants Pass, Oregon, Sarah Bristol. Sarah, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for joining us here on the Hill. Your community, your town is squarely in the middle of this Supreme Court hearing. Explain to us what's going on there, how you got in the middle of this, and how it got all the way to the Supreme Court.
We are indeed in the middle of it. The city of Grants Pass is about 40,000 people, and we don't have a full-time shelter for unhoused population, low barrier shelter that doesn't have a lot of rules and restrictions. And so I think that's how we found ourselves in the middle of this, is that the city was trying to regulate our public parks and keep parks free from camping, and found ourselves in the middle of a lawsuit.
What would you say to Sonia Sotomayor when you heard her there say, where are they supposed to sleep? Are they supposed to kill themselves not sleeping? What would you say to the justice?
You know, I became mayor just 3 years ago, and the case had already been decided and appealed before I was mayor here. So I don't necessarily have the same opinions as some of the previous leadership here in the city. But I think the issue at stake is, where are they supposed to go? And here, I think the issue we're dealing with in our city, as well as all other cities, are the need to regulate our public spaces and be able to have rules. I think it's pretty standard that city parks close at dusk unless there's a special event, and that's the case here. So it's not about punishing the homeless people so much as protecting the parks and enforcing park rules. And certainly I understand that the homeless population does need a place to go.
What is the solution for a town like yours if there's not a shelter, but then you say, you know what, these are public sidewalks. These are public parks. You have to follow the rules. You can't just camp there. What is the middle ground? What is the solution as you see it, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that's the trick is what is that middle ground? I do think that we need to be able to have rules and enforce our rules in our parks. I think that we also need to have places for the homeless population to go where they can sleep. And I think the question is really who pays for that and who's responsible for making sure that that happens. And I know it's been a tricky situation here in Grants Pass that we've been grappling with for the last 3 years that I've been mayor.
Sarah Bristol joining us from Grants Pass, Oregon. We thank you so much for your time, the mayor of the town there. In the middle of this Supreme Court case, we'll talk to you again soon, maybe when the verdict comes down. Sarah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So the Eighth Amendment, Scott, deals with cruel and unusual punishment, and that is at the center of this case right now.
Yep, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting with this conservative court, how they come down on the Eighth Amendment. I got a good idea where the liberal justices will come down. But this
Which is what you heard from Sonia Sotomayor.
Exactly.
How are we supposed to treat these people? And then on the other side, you heard from Neil Gorsuch basically saying, well, if you can sleep there, can you defecate there? Can you urinate there? And is that, under your Eighth Amendment?
That's a weird visual for this program.
No, but I mean, I agree. But I mean, it's the argument that's being made.
Well, they've got to ultimately decide. The broader issue, whether you talk about the Eighth Amendment or not, is how do we solve this homeless issue? I hope this decision, whatever it comes down, drives the broader narrative as to how we solve the homeless issue and how do we send $60 billion or $90 billion to our supporters or international support, and yet poor people here and homeless people here, it's expensive to take care of them. It's complicated, a continuum of care. We got to do something about the homeland as well.
Unsheltered homeless in America, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, 256,000 in 2023. In 2016, for example, that number was at 176,000.
And the answer is,
so it's
COVID.
But the answer is putting them in either a homeless shelter or apartments, but it's expensive though.
But they don't want to go very often.
Well, that's anecdotal. Some of them don't. Some of them do.
No, it's not.
You got some statistics to support that?
I can tell you that when the District of Columbia has tried and tried and tried to deal with this problem, and you know it, we've seen it here as they tried to close the parks because they opened the parks up after COVID.
But isn't that part of their mental illness, which is when I talk about continuum of care, it's expensive taking care of homeless people, veterans and otherwise. We got to invest the time, money, and resources to do it.
That's what I was going to say. What we're really talking about here is America's chronic, unaddressed, broken mental health system that we have not addressed properly. We don't deal with involuntary commitments the way that we should. We don't deal with long-term mental health treatment. This is the underlying.
And that stopped with Reagan.
Let's move on. I was going to move on.
Let's move on. Let's go. Let's move on.
I was going to move on to Chris.
Everyone loves Reagan.
And here's why I want to move on to Chris. Today happens to be the 20th anniversary of the death of Pat Tillman. He, of course, was the NFL player who left pro football to join the Army after 9/11. On April 22nd, 2004, Tillman, just 27 years old at the time, killed by friendly fire. The U.S. military initially reported that Tillman and his unit were attacked near the Pakistani border, but subsequent investigations revealed his death was a tragic mistake. Pat Tillman, we remember him on this day, Chris, and I just wonder from your perspective what we can take away from Pat Tillman 20 years later.
The need of good men and good women to step up to defend the United States never goes away.
Right.
We do not solve the problems that plague humanity. What we do is we mitigate them, we remediate them, and I think it is excellent that Pat Tillman is held up as a hero. We need more people that we can point to and say that this was a person who, no greater love hath any man than to lay down his life for his friends. And the tragic circumstances are, of course, frustrating, but he went forward to serve knowing what the cost might be, and that is what makes a hero.
That 20 years ago today, Pat Tillman at 27 years old. All right, still to come here from the Hill. President Biden told a tale about Papua New Guinea, why the leader of that nation is none too pleased, and on the other side of the break, Hot Mic with Mick. What about this idea? Naming Mitt Romney, he's warming up, not Mitt Romney, Mick Mulvaney. Naming Mitt Romney the head of one of Mick's alma maters. Could that happen? We'll ask Mick. You're watching The Hill. Stay with us.
Tonight on News Nation, a special 2-hour Banfield. Go inside the murders of the 2 Kansas moms. Ashley breaks down the case piece by piece with special guests who know firsthand what really happened. Banfield tonight at a special time, 9/8 Central.
Which floated the idea of having Mitt Romney lead Harvard University, a Democratic senator, Harvard grad, by the way. John Fetterman gave his support. The Democratic senator taking to X, saying he co-signs the idea, adding, quote, Harvard and its academic peers need to recalibrate from far left orthodoxy. What about this, Mick? Sound crazy or no?
No, I actually kind of like this. I mean, keep in mind, they need to do something, and they're not going to hire other alumni like, me and Ted Cruz. That's just never, ever going to happen. We don't look the role. They don't want us. Mitt Romney would probably fit in fairly well. I'm going to use a word that it's going to sound pejorative, but it's not. That sort of his arrogance fits in at Harvard, right? He just does. He's sort of got that Harvard type of personality. Now, that being said, he also has a track record for being able to turn places around. Remember what we did he did the Salt Lake City Olympics a couple decades ago. He could be really, really good at this. There's another name, by the way, that's floating out there, or at least I'm going to float it out there, which is a Democrat, which is Joe Kennedy, a highly regarded Democrat, but who has friends on both sides of the aisle. Who has a strong connection with the school, obviously. That'd be another name I'd put on the list if they're looking around.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Meantime, the former Supreme Court Justice, Stephen Breyer, pushing back on accusations that the High Court has become political when he appeared on ABC's This Week.
I've not seen politics in the court, and I've been a judge for 40 years. I've not seen...
You have not seen politics in the court?
Not politics in the sense in which I understood that word when I worked for Senator Kennedy. That isn't there. That just isn't there.
You buying that, Mulvaney?
Yeah. Not just, I didn't buy it any more than John Carl did when he asked the question. You could see the look on his face, like, come on, seriously. By the way, later in the same interview, he goes, we do consider real-world consequences. I have news for the justice. That's politics. Listen, this is what you expect somebody to say who's been a judge for his whole life and has never really been in politics. But what he just described in that interview was politics. Look, if they were considering the real-world implications, let's say they have a law that they all agree is unconstitutional. But if they consider the real-world implications and they go, well, we know it's unconstitutional, but it would really throw chaos into the system, so we can't rule it unconstitutional, that's politics. So I hear what Justice Breyer is saying. I'm a great admirer of his. He's certainly beyond reproach in terms of his intellect, but that's just a foolish comment from somebody who clearly is engaging in politics without recognizing it.
All right. Hot mic with Mick. Thank you, sir. Stand by the way. President Biden, I want to get your take on this as a former chief of staff. President Biden is in some diplomatic hot water, you could say, after his comments about cannibals in Papua New Guinea came back to bite him. Here was the president talking about his uncle who fought in World War II.
He flew those single-engine planes as reconnaissance over war zones. They got shot down in New Guinea, and they never found the body because there were a lot of cannibals for real in that part of New Guinea.
Well, the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea is taking exception to the president's comments, saying that President Biden, quote, appeared to imply his uncle was eaten by cannibals. President Biden's remarks might have been a slip of the tongue. However, my country does not deserve to be labeled as such.
Well, yeah, maybe a little unfortunate from the president. I mean, look, I think a lot of times President Biden's critics like to pounce on these. Yeah. I guess you could call it a gaffe, and this is an example of it. So, but I don't think. I mean, look, it's an unfortunate headline, but I don't see it going too far.
That woman standing behind Biden is the avatar of the whole Democratic Party, because as he's talking, the look on her face went from curiosity to real concern, right? She was like, he's whispering.
Please stop talking.
He's whispering, he's talking about it, then they shot down, and then he gets the cannibals and her eyes get wide like, oh, no, I did not know we were cannibals.
Do you want to defend your guy at all?
Well, he just goes off on tangents.
Yeah.
And he's off script and he just goes. Yeah. And when he says cannibals, I had the same look as she did. I was like, where's he going with this?
He was trying to storytell, right?
Right, he's a storyteller.
Yeah. Mulvaney, as a chief of staff, you hear that, and what are you doing next?
Yeah.
Now, part of the art of being a chief of staff is trying to figure out what is something that's a 12-hour story, a 24-hour story, or a week-long story. This is no big deal. Right. This is you sort of go, something more bizarre is going to happen tomorrow.
All right. I don't know if this is bizarre, but I'll let you know of it. Former First Lady Melania Trump recently released a Mother's Day themed necklace over the weekend. Retails for about $245. You can find the necklace on Melania's website. Each one will include her signature on the back of it. But what happens with the money made from the necklace, that is unclear, since the website does not say where the proceeds will go.
She should keep the money.
She should keep the money?
Of course she should.
Former First Lady, though? You don't think it should be donated somewhere? Or?
Oh, well, she could I'm just saying she should decide what to happen with it, not that it should go to the campaign.
Okay.
Well, the former president probably cut her off, and so she's selling this.
Oh, come on, Scott. Come on, Scott. Mulvaney, we got to say goodbye to you from here. We'll catch you, I think, tomorrow, hopefully. Talk to you again soon. Thanks, Mick.
Thanks. You guys have given me some great Christmas ideas. Thanks very much.
You got it. Coming up here from the Hill, they staged a sit-in and they got fired. Now former employees of Google who protested the company's contract with Israel are fighting back. Leland Vitter joins us on the other side of the break. Stay with us. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. The fired Google employees who held anti-Israel protests at the Google offices in New York and California are now speaking out. In a press conference held earlier today, they decided to tell their side of the story, saying it was an act of retaliation. Many chose to remain anonymous.
I don't want my statement to skew my hiring prospects. This is because I've just come to learn that our opinions at the workplace can come back and hurt us.
Let's Leland.
You know what the kids say these days?
What are the
F
kids
around
say?
and find out. Okay, we're in the find out phase.
Turns out that protesting at your place of employment and getting arrested isn't a good hiring strategy or a retention strategy.
I'm also old enough to remember when people who engaged in civil disobedience to change the world did so without masks on.
All these protests
signed their name to it and said, this is important for me to stand up to and for, and I'm willing to take the risks of doing so.
I could